You don't live in a democracy. There are a few things in life you can be absolutely sure of, but if I had to guess, I'd be willing to bet that literally no one watching this video lives in a democracy. Now that may sound crazy, but it is completely true. I mean, if you were lucky enough to have a time machine, and hey, once you're done with it, please let me use it as well, but you use that time machine to travel back to the birthplace of the very first democracy in ancient Greece, you would see a type of government starkly different than the ones practiced today in the United States and other modern democracies. Once you transported into ancient Greece, you could go up to the guy who first identified every form of government, Aristotle, and say, yep, we are pretty great. We have a government where we elect our politicians and they represent us in a legislative body. Now, he would respond with, oh, so you live in an oligarchy. And you'd be like, what? No, we live in a democracy. And Aristotle would say, oh, so your government has no single leader, is corrupt, and led by mob rule? But you'd be like, no, you don't understand. We have one man who runs the government, and is he wealthy? Well, yes, but we have another group of people who make the laws. Are those people wealthy? Well, yes, but we have another group of people who interpret the laws. And I know what you're going to ask. Yes, they are wealthy. You live in an oligarchy. Dang it. Okay, so from that interaction, we know there is obviously a gap here between what we consider a democracy now and what has historically been considered a true democracy in the past. Now, to understand why, we need to go over what a democracy really is, and for that matter, what a government is. So, like I mentioned before, the man who first studied governments and came up with their names was the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle. Now, Aristotle was really the first ever political scientist. He had a class of students, which today we would consider more like researchers, and they did a study about every type of rule used in Greece at this time. His research took a lot of effort, but the conclusion was actually really simple. They deduced that to understand what a government is and what type that you live in, you really only need to ask two questions. And that's the first one, who rules? And the second one, who benefits from them ruling? Now, he and his students studied almost 200 different types of governments and came to the conclusion that there were really only 3 different versions of government in general. Now, Aristotle believed that everything in the world had a good and a bad version, and government was no exception. So these 3 methods have good versions and bad versions, which in all, that brings us to a total of 6 methods of government, which he called kingship, aristocracy, polity, tyranny, oligarchy, and wouldn't you know it, democracy. And surprisingly, these are all super easy to understand. The 3 good forms of government were kingship, aristocracy, and polity. Now, in a kingship, there is only one ruler, but that ruler is sort of like a benevolent king. He looks out for his people and treats his subjects fairly. He knows what's best for them, and they accept it. Next, in an aristocracy, there are many rulers of the government. These people should be the true best of the best. They are not ruling because it makes them wealthy, gives them influence, or because it's cool. They rule because they simply know what they are doing, and everyone benefits when they're in charge. No single one of them has more power over the other, but they all rule together, using their expertise for the advantage of everyone. And the last of the good forms of government is the polity. In a polity, everyone rules. This can be done by voting on certain rules, but the goal of rule is for the common good. What is good for the majority of people, the majority of the time, is the priority. There are laws that everyone must abide by, and those rules are made by everyone. These make pretty good sense. If you go down from the top and answer the first questions mentioned earlier, it's basically just one person rules, kingship. Some people rule, aristocracy. All people rule, who want to, by the way, polity. Now, the next 3 forms of government, though, are the bad forms of government. What's interesting is these are actually the exact same 3 types of government, but if you go back to that original second question you need to ask to understand what government that you live in, the second question's answer would pretty much always be, not me. So, the first of the bad 3 is tyranny. Now, this is when one person is in charge and they suck. This person only looks out for themselves, exploits the people that they rule over, and really is only concerned with control. Justice is not exactly a priority, and you do not matter at all in this form of government. What the king says goes, and good luck arguing with that. Now, next, there is an oligarchy. And we should all be pretty familiar with this one. In an oligarchy, a small portion of the population rules for everyone. So an oligarchy may have elections for representatives, but Aristotle believed that elections naturally attract the type of people who can win an election rather than the type of person who is good at the job the election is actually for. I mean, think about it. If you are not wealthy, could you give up doing your job for a year to 2 years in order to campaign for political office? I know for a fact I couldn't, so Aristotle believed that elections only really put the wealthy in charge. Wealth becomes the measure of success we put people in office for, and not skill. Then, once elections happen and all of the more wealthy people are running the government, their priorities do not necessarily align with the middle and lower classes of the country. So this government may be representative technically, but in reality, it is the wealthy running the show. And the last of the 3 bad governments is democracy? Why did Aristotle consider democracy a bad form of government? Well, this all has to do with stability. I'll explain that in a second. But in a democracy, it is quite literally rule by the majority. If you're a minority or have an unpopular opinion, well, good luck getting support from the government, because democracies really only look out for the masses. And unfortunately, the masses can sometimes be quite rowdy and unpredictable. Aristotle did not observe mob rule to be the most level-headed type of government, and if you've ever been to a football game or a protest, then you can probably relate. Aristotle considered oligarchy to be ruled by the wealthy, and democracy to be ruled by the poor. Now, in a normal government, you're going to have wealthy people and you're going to have poor people. That's just life. But the difference lies in who holds the power. Aristotle believed that poor people acted out of desperation and emotion, and therefore the government would be unstable. And to contrast that, he believed that the wealthy ruled by greed and corruption, so the government would also become unstable. This is why Aristotle believed stability was one of the most important aspects of a good government. He realized that in order to maintain a healthy government, the majority of its citizens needed to be middle class. Rich enough to not become greedy and corrupt, but not poor enough to act out of desperation. He thought the middle class were the best candidates to rule because they have a true vested interest in wanting things to just work. Middle class people are fine with being ruled by others, but are also comfortable leading as well. They don't hop on the latest revolutionary trends of the masses, but they also are not going to spend all the government's money wastefully. They were not arrogant, but they were also not desperate. They know best because they are the average. They are the people who are the country. And when you think about it, that is all a government is. It is people running a country. We have buildings and anthems and history and geography, but a government is only as good as the people running it. So to find out what government you live in, ask yourself, who rules and who benefits from them ruling? Yeah, boy!